So, hey guys, welcome back. Josh Cantwell here, strategicrealestatecoach.com and Freeland Ventures. Welcome back to Strategic Real Estate Coach podcast and interview series. I am in particular excited to be with you today to talk about private lending with a relatively new friend. His name is Keith Baker, and Keith has an amazing podcast of his own called the Private Lender Podcast. Keith, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Josh. Glad to be here.
You bet. So Keith, let's jump in. Tell us a little bit about the Private Lender Podcast. You have a passion for money. You've done a bunch of real estate deals, but you also have, a full-time job, really with an amazing opportunity as an owner, shareholder in your existing company. And that's led you to become a real focus on passive investing as a self-directed IRA investor and a private lender. So tell us about the podcast and your passion for private money.
Sure. Yeah. Well, the podcast was born out of, I was on vacation with the family. My whole family loves the beach. I don't. So when we're sitting down in Florida one day in August, and I live in Houston, heat and humidity are around me all the time. I don't see why I need to pay extra money to go and, feel it on the beach. But it all came together that I wanted to tell people about private money, and I'll get to kind of why in a second. But it's passive. It's every time I talk to a real estate investor, what are your needs? Oh, I'd love to get more private money. Love to have more funding, more private money, easy, quick, inexpensive, forget the banks, hard money, all that kind of stuff. So I said, okay, well, I've always been told that I have the face for radio. So why not go ahead and, start a podcast? And I launched on January 1 and have been fumbling my way through it ever since. And I absolutely love it. I do have a great day job where, I bounced around. I did construction. I did the oil field, worked on the rigs, and I've always enjoyed real estate and the construction aspect of it. And for a while there, I was a contractor, and I did a lot of flips for other rehabbers. But I quickly found that I was doing all the work. I'm the one that was getting the hangnails and bleeding fingers and everything. And I didn't. So as I was trying to transitioning with my, I had to have a 9-to-5. We had had a family. I wasn't the type of person just to quit. So when I got out of the oil field and went into insurance adjusting, which is what I do now, but I still do it for the oil field. It's high dollar, high ticket items, but I travel at the last minute often. I mean, there's a bag. Literally, I have a bag in the closet next to the front door. Something goes boom, I'm on a plane to go. So it really prohibits me from meeting contractors or future tenants or, and I know this is at that time, and this is, a decade ago. It's not what it is now where you can just walk up with a smartphone and gain access to a house. So I focused on private lending, and I had some old 401ks because typically someone born in the 70s, I've bounced around from job to job to job until I finally landed on the one I'm at now. So I had a bunch of old 401ks, converted them. Fortunately for us in Houston here, there's a wonderful company called Quest IRA, gives free education, and started walking down that path and became known as just a lender, really. But I would loan only to whales in the Houston area, the big names. But and I would do at ridiculously low interest rates. But the caveat was that borrower had to walk me through the deal so I could see their business from start to finish on that property. And that is that's when I saw the power of private lending. It isn't just the money or the debt that you're getting. It's the education, it's the network, and really just the knowledge of and seeing things and how people do things. And that's really, for me, that's where the golden nuggets are, not just the payments.
Yeah, you bet. I recruit capital often from people that think they want to be active investors, right? And when I educate them about self-directed IRAs, they're like, oh my God, I have this old 401k with 300 grand in there, 150 grand or whatever.
Yeah.
And they're like, well, can I actively flip money using this self-directed IRA cash? I'm like, well, you can, but all the profit has to go back in your IRA. And they're like, forget it. I don't want to do it. It's too much work. So then I'm like, well, you could lend to us, you could lend to these other borrowers, and you could follow along the process and learn while you're getting an interest on your money. So it's very, very similar to what you're talking about. Now, Keith, you handle millions of dollars of other people's money every day, and that's why you become comfortable as a private lender with your own cash. Mm-hmm. So tell us a little bit about that. Like, you're managing money in these, and taking off on planes, and you're used to looking at risk and you're used to looking at trying to mitigate that risk. How is your day job sort of permeated into your private lending business and managing that risk?
It's funny. You make it sound a lot sexier than it really is, but I'll happy to walk you down that. Yeah. That's, so basically what happens is my background was drilling. So usually the upstream stuff. So anytime there's a well blowout, there's a fire, or like say a refinery, something goes boom, that's when I get to go to work, is when I'm a loss adjuster. So when these things happen, I get on the plane, I go look at them quickly. And, if it's just an oil well fire, I'll write a report. If it's a refinery that gets a little more involved, you have to get engineers and accountants, and you get into some very complicated financial calculations for things like, say, business interruption, where something goes bad. There's an insurance policy that'll pay your monthly kind of revenue, or at least the profit side of it. But it's based on, I don't get into it. That's why I get the accountants into it. So, but the point being is the people I work for are mostly Lloyd's of London, syndicates at Lloyd's of London. It's their money that's being paid out to these oil companies. And it's up to me to pour through all the invoices to make sure that everything is relevant to repair. If widget A blows up, then I look at the whole repair process. I'll liaise with the engineers on, what the cause was, so on and so forth. But at the end of the day, it's all about what is that going to cost the insurance company to reimburse the oil company. And so I've actually hand delivered checks for $5,000 to small oil companies in Houston. Also negotiated settlements in excess of $100 million for some famous hurricane claims. So it's, it took me about 5 years to get over the fact that this isn't my money, and to kind of lose that awe of, if I make a mistake, this really does cost somebody. Fortunately, it doesn't cost a life, at the end of the day. I just deal with dumb iron and property. I don't deal with feelings or soft tissue, fortunately, but it's still, people get funny when it comes to money, so especially if they feel like they're losing it. So it was just kind of a natural fit. So because of my adjusting career and, jumping on planes at the last minute to go look at things that are burning, into, okay, well, I can do this passively. And I remember being in a small town in Pennsylvania and getting a call from a property manager about how we're going to have to evict. And I'm like, why are you, just send me the bill, get it done. I don't need to be in this process. If the metrics aren't met, get rid of them. So that's how I've kind of I like the passive thing. It's other people's money, although it's my money that I loan, but it just kind of naturally progressed for me, of looking after someone else's money and doing the same thing with in the oil field, but doing the same thing with real estate. Got it.
So Keith, is there any kind of criteria specifically that you look at now in your real estate private lending practice that you talk about on your podcast? Is there a checklist or a go for flight, sort of check off plan before you lend money out? I am coming up with that. I speak about my criteria. I'll give you one of my pillars. Pillar number one is there are two types of ROI. First, I want to know, am I going to get the return of my investment back? That's number one. And then if I am going to get it back, once I've established that it's going to come back, or I'm relatively comfortable with it coming back, then all right, how much am I going to make on that? That's the first pillar. The second pillar is never lend to family or friends. If you have the money to give it with the expectation that it won't come back. If it does come back to you, they pay it back, great. But Thanksgiving and Christmas gets really odd when people commingle money with friends and family. Ask me how I know. So those are the two big pillars. And the third pillar is, I tell people unequivocally, if you're starting out as a private lender now, Josh, not someone like yourself with years of experience, but someone new to the private lending game, stay the heck away from subordinate liens. Don't loan on seconds, thirds, etc. Just stay in the first position lien. It's the best way to secure yourself until you can get comfortable with somebody's business model, how they lend. I tell people never take a second position. I have 2 seconds and an unsecured note out right now that I do because I know it's based on the people. It's based on their work history and they're also their investment history. But that's kind of my go-to, is like stay away from that early on. Get your feet wet, learn how to do it safely, And when you are in a second position lien, you're not just sitting there with your hand out because, you've basically given up all control
over your money at that point. To me, it's like an unsecured note, just handing somebody some money. So that's kind of my hard and fast. Also, never lend to newbies. That's what hard money lenders are for. That's why they charge 15 to 18% and all those points, because they look at it the same way I do, but they're in the business of making money.
Right.
I'm in the business of investing with money. So it's more passive. It's different, but I look at it the same way. Like, don't only go to whales, people who have a proven track record. Another thing is, in local markets, lend to people who would take a reputation hit if they didn't pay you back.
Yeah, I like that one.
You put more skin. You put more of their skin in the game. Like, skin doesn't have to mean money, necessarily. Obviously, it does. If somebody comes to me and goes, "Hey, this is at 72% after repaired value, all in," I say, "Okay, well, put in another 6 or 7%, get me down to about 65, and we'll talk all day." That's one way you can put skin in the game. The other is, if somebody is a whale in the market and let's say they're starting off, they're coaching, or they're getting students in the area. I will loan to a student if it's, a newbie, if they have a coach that I know and trust and have seen them work. And so if one of those whales in your local market messes up, I mean, look, it's not to say that people don't make mistakes. People with experience make mistakes, but a whale in the market can't just walk away and go, "You know what, I messed up. I'm not going to pay it back. I'm just going to walk away from this," because they've got reputation on the line. Right. And that is a whole nother level of protection and mitigation that a lot of people don't think of.
Yeah, I like that. Those are some great ones that I haven't thought about. Reputation damage. I haven't really talked about that too much, but so true.
Yeah, well, in your business right now, I mean, it's better if you make a mistake. It's better to fess up and say, "Look, it's going to cost X. I need 2 months to give you the money back. You will be made whole." And if people can go on, "Yep, this investment didn't go through, but you know what? I got made whole. Josh kept his word. He did what he said." That's huge. That goes a long way, especially in this day and age, I think.
Yeah, and we've got to make people whole, not only get them their principal, but their interests at all costs. Like, not that we're going to do anything wrong or fraudulent or anything at all costs, but literally, like, in my mindset, it's like getting people, when they invest with us, the first thing on our list of things to do in our business and values is make sure we protect our investors' principal. It's number one. They're our number one priority. Before I take any money out of the business, before my partners get paid, my staff knows, like, everybody is on the line to make sure that the private lender gets their money back, their principal at least. Mm-hmm. And then, of course, their interest too. But, rule number one is never lose principal. Rule number two is refer back to rule number one.
Yeah.
Never lose principal. So Keith, I know you've lent out a number of different deals. You've given us some amazing sort of pillars of what to look for. What is your traditional type of loan that you like to make? Is it always a first mortgage lien, like a private lender loan? Do you invest equity in deals? Are you looking at longer term equity plays where you can get your principal back and be an owner in perpetuity? Just give us a flavor for some of the different deal flow that you've looked at.
All the above. Yeah. It started off, the way I kind of became into, there's a guy I interviewed, his name's Tom Berry, Investor Loan Source. And Tom was similar background to you, financial advisor, and got into real estate and just killed it, and had all these private lenders saying, "Hey, Tom, I got money, but it's not working." So he put it to work, and I was going to put my money, my old 401k, I was just going to roll it over into his fund. And he had this great conversation. He was open and honest, and he laid everything out. And I decided after that phone call, I was like, I think I want to do this. I want to learn how to do this. And I wanted to niche down, learn everything I could about that, and be known as a private lender. Because I figured if everyone's looking for private lender, that's the guy I should be. And so, excuse me, I decided to do that. And when I did that, I started looking at, all right, I'm going to do fix and flips. Give me 2 points. I'll give you 10%. You give me 2 or 3 points up front. Every 6 months, we're turning the money around. I'm happy on my interest rates. I'm happy on my cash flow from the points. But it was in my self-directed IRA, so I don't get to see that money. It just accumulates. And then I started lending to just a handful of guys, a couple of guys really. And then business models changed. They went from buying and selling into more of a wholesaling niche because of the market was dictating. So they didn't need private money. And so I was actually traveling for my day job. I was in Scotland, and I got a phone call, and they said, "Hey, would you mind loaning to this guy?" And I was like, "Yeah, I know of him in the Houston area. Okay, sure, I'll talk to him." Well, long story short, that guy is Landon Rothstein. He's now my partner in Asset REI, and he's co-owner of 713 RIA and 713 coaching or mentoring. So
Nice.
yeah, and through Landon, he's introduced me to people like Mitch Stevens. And hey, look, turn this into a seller finance note and collect on it for 20 years. So now I'm in, I still part of the Atari generation. I do like that instant gratification from the flips, but I'm looking now more. I don't mind taking a smaller interest rate for 3 years, for example, if it's going into a project that I believe in, where somebody who's not mortgageable can come in, step into a house, start making payments, have their piece of the American dream. And then as long as they're increasing the value of my property or the equity that my loan is tied to, I'm happy, So it's not all about the 15% anymore. I won't turn it down. Don't get me wrong, but I've gone from the short attention span into the longer attention span, because at the end of the day, as much as I love my day job and want to exceed and excel at it, I don't want to do it forever. I want to be able to sit back and say, okay, I've got X amount of money coming in from either my private lending or my real estate holdings or both. And so that's where I'm kind of shifting now. I mean, you come to me with a good LTV, a good loan to value. If I'm all in at 50%, there's not a whole lot of projects that I won't shy away from. I mean, there are some, there's certain areas that I won't, I'm sure you've heard about this little storm called Hurricane Harvey.
Yeah.
And, and all the other hurricanes. So there are some things along the coast that I won't get into. But as long as it's a deal, I will at least sit down and listen with whoever's presenting it.
Nice.
So that's a long way of saying I really don't have a criteria, but I have all the criteria.
Yeah, sure. What did the deal dictates, right? The deal dictates. So if you're looking at.
Yeah, well, a friend of the first guy I loaning on single family residence, and he comes to me and says, "Hey, I got this commercial opportunity." And I'm like, "Whoa, that's out of my wheelhouse. I don't, I got to stay in my lane, my single family lane." And he was convincing enough, successful, young guy, but had been doing it already a decade. And he jumped in. He said, "Look, I need $70,000 for this." I was like, I tell you what, as long as it appraises for $150, and you get a commercial appraiser, with a thick booklet of what this thing is going to be worth, I'll take a look at the loan. And the appraiser came back with a value of $305,000. So I called the borrower and I said, "Look, I'm going to loan you this money, and you don't have to pay me back. I'll take over. I'll foreclose, and I will loan to you again and again." And you keep bringing these kind of deals. Almost all my risk went away. So many things could go wrong for $70,000 and still recoup $300. Yeah. And so that's when I started. Okay, I need to start looking at other things and sharpening other tools. And so now I don't make it a habit to loan on commercial, but I will in my free time. That is what I'm studying up on.
Nice. There you go. So Keith, what's maybe a crazy deal that you didn't do, or a deal that you passed on? Obviously you said you look at a lot of different stuff. You've probably seen some pretty wicked deals come across your desk that you passed on, or things that maybe you funded that you wish you passed on. So tell us about that.
There's a couple of second position liens that I wish I would have passed on. I'm happy to say that it did work out for me, just not in the timeline that was agreed. But that's the second positions. When you do that, you just take yourself out of control, and that's not a good place to be. Yeah. For me, for someone like myself. Other people are okay with it. I'm going to give you my money, and I don't expect to see anything really for 3 years. That's great. Some of the ones that I wish I had, there was this, for lack of a better term, an old mansion that was going back to the bank, and we needed about $120,000 to make everything right with the bank, get the payment going back, and basically we were looking to kind of take it over on a sub-2 type of deal. And it was about 2.5 hours away from Houston, almost to Louisiana. So I got up one Saturday, drove out there, met the owners, and it was just it's too much. It was too opulent. It's the market was so small. The buying list, the buyer list was so small for something like that I didn't want to tie up my money into it. And so I thank the people for meeting me out there, walking me through. I was like, and this was a deal that my buddy Landon, my partner Landon, had found. And I said no. I called him on the way home. I said no. I'm not 100% comfortable on that. If it was 20,000, I wouldn't have a problem with it. But it's like $500,000 home, and they had converted it to an office. Long story short, my 120,000 would have doubled in about 40 days had I pulled the trigger on the deal, but I didn't because I wasn't comfortable with it. So, yeah. I say that's a successful loss for me because I didn't, if you don't nothing venture, nothing gain. But at the same time, it's real easy to sit back and Monday morning quarterback that deal. But it's just I like in my area, I like deals between $50,000 to $200,000 on the house. You're going to find plenty of people to get into those homes. Once and $500,000, I know in places like California is a hovel. But in Houston, in Texas, that's a $500,000 is going to get you a nice spread. So it was too nice of a property, and at the end of the day, I made the right decision. I wasn't comfortable. I stuck with my gut. I didn't lose money, but I could have made so much.
Right. Yeah, it's often not the deals though that you don't do. It's the deals that you do that go backwards.
Yeah,
that often affects somebody's, financial future, forever. A lot of people can't afford to lose principal.
Yep.
And if I could have done this deal. I could have bought Facebook stock. I could have bought Google. Great. So could the rest of us. However, good investors long-term make good, consistent decisions. They usually don't have a one-time windfall that makes them wealthy. It's usually about consistent decisions and avoiding a big loss that ultimately makes somebody a really good investor long-term. That's great. Keith, any others come to mind that you either did or didn't do?
Yeah, there's I paid $5,000 for a house I can't get got of.
Really? All right.
Yeah. It was back taxes owed and out-of-state owner. He got tired of getting the notices from the city. They'd have to go by. The city would go by and mow the yard and stuff. And I remember going to the house going, this is the biggest piece of crap I have ever seen. But I've seen worse. I've seen, you stick around real estate long enough, you're going to see some, you're going to go from the manure pile to the diamond. And I thought I was going to make this into a diamond. And as long as it just gives, pays for itself and doesn't cost me money at this point, I'll be happy but it's, it was, I kind of broke my rules. I was like, it's too close to the water. I don't like investing. I was like, okay, well, I'll just make him get a flood policy. And, well, I didn't follow up on that. And I forgot to put in my attorney instructions to the closing company, the title company. So normally I am having some checklists, slowly built up, but I'm a one-man shop with the podcast, so it takes me a lot longer to get things out. But one of the things I look for is, I want insurance binders in place for both, obviously for title insurance, property, and if it's and flood if it's in Texas or anywhere near the Gulf Coast, I require flood insurance. And if you can't pay the $450 a year for the insurance that's outside of the floodplain, then you really don't have a deal.
Yeah,
so I look at it.
Gotcha. So Keith, last question. Looking back after lending out a lot of money and meeting a lot of people through your podcast and obviously investing in flips of your own, is there any advice that you give your younger former self that you look back and tell our audience or tell yourself, man, this stands out, a couple things I would have done differently that I think you can share that would impact other people?
Absolutely. And let's go ahead and let's replace the tape because I've got a whole bunch of things. Yeah.
Lots of stuff to share.
Oh yeah. I have few regrets in my life and I'm happy about that, but I would have, first off, started much earlier than I did. And I had some people not in real estate, just, friends of the family that, tried to take a young 17, 19-year-old Keith Baker and say, hey, look, man, you got a little windfall cash from someone in the family, put that away. I'm like, no, I'm going to college. I'm going to burn all this money, And now I go back and talk to these people and I'm like, man, if I would have just even 10% of what you said, 20, 25 years ago, I'd be so much better off. So I would have started much earlier than I did, but I was, typical teenager. I'm going to go to college. I'm going to change the world. My parents don't know crap. They don't know what they're talking about.
Yeah.
And then I started paying my own mortgage, and I was like, oh, hey, mom and dad. Okay. Yeah. So I would have started early. I would have jumped in. I probably would have niched down a little more. I went a little broad, like, oh, I'll try flipping. I'll try landlording. I'll try pick something, find somebody who can, whether it be a coach, a mentor, or even just a friend or family member, find somebody who's doing what you want to do and follow them and do it sooner than later. Don't, I was in my 30s before I, had the aha moment of like, I've just let 15 years go by, and so there's that, constantly being behind the 8 ball and reading. I would have read so much more earlier on than because now I don't have the time. Wife, kids, jobs, podcasts, investing. I try to dedicate about 15 to 20 minutes a night in reading about real estate, about business, and educating myself. Those are the 3 big things I would have done absolutely different.
Yeah.
And started saving. And because there's one negative side to private lending, and that's you're going to run out of money. There's only so much you can lend out before you go into like broking or creating a fund and everything. So I wish I would have saved more so I could have my hands in more and more projects.
There you go. Nice. Yeah. One quick tip. I started doing this year. I listen to audiobooks, right?
Mm-hmm.
But now I built up my tolerance for speed to the point where I could listen to them at 2.0 speed. And I, at the same time now, can listen to them. I buy the physical book with a highlighter. And so I listen to it on 2.0 speed and highlight at the same time. And I'm able to pause it, when I have something that I really want to think about or something I really want to push down into my core and make sure I use it. But for me, listening at 2.0 speed, I get through some of the minutia a little quicker. And by highlighting, I'm actually retaining way more than I ever retained. I've been reading, I'm 42 years old, I've been reading all my life.
Yeah.
Especially since college, business books, hundreds and hundreds of books, real estate books, etc., success books. And now I finally feel like I'm retaining more. I've always been a really slow reader. So I didn't really like to read because it would take me forever to get through a book. But now, so take that for what it's worth. Maybe that'll help you.
It's great because I do podcasts at 1.5 speed in the car for that same reason. Obviously, I'm not highlighting while I'm driving, or I shouldn't be. But I think I'm going to incorporate that because it's you're reading, you're highlighting, and you're listening at the same time, and that's really reinforcing. I like that idea. Yeah, I'll have to.
Multiple senses, man, gets in there pretty good. So fantastic. Well, cool. Keith, listen, thanks so much for sharing. Tell us a little bit more about where we can find your podcast, where we can get in touch with you if our audience wants to reach out, listen to your stuff, or approach you about a deal.
Sure.
How to get in touch with you? Where can they find you?
Yeah, so privatelenderpodcast.com is where you can find me. Email is Keith, Keith, at privatelenderpodcast.com. And you can listen to the show, iTunes, Google, Stitcher, SoundCloud, anywhere, any platform that houses the podcast, you should be able to find me there. And while we're at it, if anyone listening can go right now to the Private Lender Podcast and also go to Josh's podcast on iTunes, leave us some ratings and reviews. We'd greatly appreciate it because that helps get the word out and helps people just like the listeners now to find this. So, but that's how you get a hold of me, privatelenderpodcast.com.
Fantastic. Yeah, my team will monitor all those different platforms that Keith mentioned. If there's questions specifically for Keith, we'll grab them off those platforms. We'll feed them to him privately. We'll get you some answers, and we'll introduce you to the right people that can get you there. So, Keith, thanks so much for joining us today, man. Really enjoyed it.
Josh, I really appreciate it, man. Take care.
All right. Talk to you soon.